Pause for Peace with me, Pastor Jule. This podcast being released to you on Sunday, August 3rd. I can't even believe we're just zooming through this year. It's already the start of August. There is a story in the Bible. It's actually a story that many churches around the world will be listening to this day. Comes from the Gospel of Luke, and it's a story that Jesus tells when somebody is asking him to settle a dispute between brothers. And Jesus launches into this story about a man who is just contemplating what he's going to do with this wealth of the abundance that has come from the earth. He's actually a farmer, and he's thinking okay, I know what I'll do for myself. I'll tear down my current barns and I'll bigger barns so that I can then store the grain in those larger barns. And this is that which he is putting his trust in. This ability to scheme and figure this all out, how he can keep for himself what has come forth from the earth. As a farmer, he did a little bit of work for that, but most of the mystery of things that are growing comes from the elements of this earth and from some skill by farmers and a whole lot of prayers answered by God so that this earth abundantly yields amazing fruits, vegetables, trees, plants, all sorts of wonderful treats for us to eat that come forth from the earth. And I think about this story, and first I think about the audacity of this man who is thinking that all these amazing gifts that have come forth from the earth are actually his for himself. He's all worried about his future. And a lot of people will talk about this story as if Jesus is trying to tell us something about our possessions. But it's kind of funny because it's really a little bit more about the abundance of the world and how we might open our hearts to realize that these thoughts that we have between ourselves and others and who's better and who should get what and whatnot, that at the end of the day, I think Jesus is trying to show it's ridiculous to think that we should keep for ourselves that which is so freely given, and that we should think only for our own needs and not the needs of all who are around. I think about this story this week in this framework of holding fast to what we think is ours. And in the Gospel of Mary, which is an extra canonical gospel, it's not one that was actually included as authoritative for those who are part of the Christian tradition, although many people study it, look to it, read it, meditate with it, and find a spiritual path in it that can help us move forward in our lives. And in the Gospel of Mary, there's this conversation going on in part of it, some of which was missing. Some of the pages are actually missing, but there's a conversation going on there between the soul and these powers or these climates, if you want to use the translation by Jeannie Leloup. But there are these 7 different powers or climates of really just kind of being a human being. And they've been translated in many different ways. This ancient language that was written in Greek first and Coptic later. We have 3 manuscripts of the Gospel of Mary that were found in 1896. The first one was discovered near Cairo, in a Cairo market near the Nile River in Egypt. And these stories in this Gospel of Mary are talking about these powers or these climates that actually, when they're not kept in check, can possess us. So as we kind of put together this understanding of 7 different just regular climates of being human being, things the power of darkness, the power of ignorance, the power of Wrath is one of them, like the guileful wrath, this not anger that is a healthy signal for us, but like wrath that eats away from within until really like we will burn it all up and really be destructive with this power of anger that is a gift to us. There's also one of the 7 powers or climates that are named is often translated as the power of craving, or some people say of desire, but often it's translated in a way to think about it as the power of clinging. And there is a way in which I think we all can identify with that power of clinging, because there are times in our lives when we are clinging way too hard, we're like holding on, like desiring such an outcome for ourselves that will benefit ourselves. Or we are clinging to a person that really is not necessarily all that helpful for us. And even if that person is somebody who like supports us and allows us to like rise to be our best selves, clinging to anybody as if we can possess that person is actually a power that needs to be like wrestled with and like learned how to let go a little bit, practices that can help us with that. And then there is a way that so many get caught up in clinging to possessions. There's a little quote I've heard this week as people were talking about this Gospel of Luke story that Jesus tells about this man who's all focused on his own stuff and his own, like what he's going to do for himself and the way the earth is produced and how he's going to keep it all for himself and have this grand like scheme. But then like the story ends at like, hey, you fool, this very night, your life is being taken from you. And so this grand scheme to like keep all this from yourself, what good is this going to do? And there's a way that like there's a clinging to possessions that's happening there. So much so that the man himself becomes possessed. It's like we become possessed by our possessions, was that cute little quote that I heard this week, which is so true for so many of us, that we literally become possessed by possessions. And our possessions end up kind of having a power over us that makes us do crazy things like hoarding the gifts of the earth all to ourselves and not taking any care for the needs of neighbors, especially those who maybe don't have enough food today. And the way that our possessions can like take us over and possess us so that we are so concerned about what we have and about how much we have squirreled away for a rainy day and what like designer brands we have and like keeping up with like the best, new gadget that's out there and the best car that we can all these things, our possessions can end up possessing us. In The Wisdom, Jesus by Cynthia Bourget, she beautifully talks about the path that Jesus was trying to teach us is what is known as the path of kenosis. This is the path of letting go. I've talked about this before because I absolutely love this quote from Cynthia Bourget, like describing this path that Jesus is inviting us to walk with him. And it helps if you are a baker to understand what this metaphor means, but she is claiming in The Wisdom Jesus that Jesus went about his life like with hands wide open, freely giving, like this exuberance of joy that he just like freely gave everywhere he went each day in his life. And that he is inviting us to this kenotic path, this kenosis, this kenotic path of letting go. And she beautifully says, he's inviting us to go through life like a knife going through a done cake. And like I said, you really only understand that metaphor if you have ever tried to bake a cake. And you've ever tried to if you've baked a cake before, you know that you kind of watch it in the oven, because even though the recipe might say cook it for this long, on such and such a heat, you can still open the oven and it's like still looks like jiggly batter. And so one way to test if your bread or your cake or whatever it is you're baking in the oven is done is you put a knife in the middle of it. Like you put a clean table knife or like sharp knife in the middle of the cake, just a little bitty smidge in there. Some people will use toothpicks to like check to see if I put it down deep and pull it out, is the toothpick clean? Or is there that clingy batter on it? Like that, the wet like brownie batter that might stay yet on a knife or on a toothpick that has gone into a cake. And so now that I've explained that metaphor, so we go through life, Cynthia Bourget is saying, Jesus is inviting us to go through life like a done cake with a knife that goes through it and nothing clings to it. Like a knife that comes out clean when it is put through a done cake, like a cake that is finished baking. This is the kenotic path. This is the like not clinging to anything kind of path that Jesus is inviting us to walk with him. And as Christians, we forget sometimes that the symbol of the cross actually is like the prime example of this kinetic path, of this kenosis, this like letting go, this like not clinging to anything. Because the story is that in the end, Jesus doesn't even cling to his own life. He willingly goes to the cross. And even though there's been that prayer in the garden, like, ooh, God, please, 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 there's a moment that like the light breaks through in him and he is able to pray in the garden according to the Gospel of Luke, not my will, but yours be done, O God. This is like the essence of the kinetic path, of this kenosis we're being invited to by Jesus, of this like realizing it's actually foolish, as the story of the Gospel of Luke says, it's foolish to think that this is the way to go through life, like holding on to everything, finding like a scheme to make sure that all that I have and all that I think is mine stays mine. This is foolishness. This is freedom, the path to which Jesus invites us. There is a prayer practice. I introduced it like episode 2, I think, of Pause for Peace. You can go on back that far in Pause for Peace and check it out. It's the path of centering prayer. And centering prayer is actually a very like popular form of prayer that many Christians undertake. What we don't always remember is that centering prayer, Cynthia Bourget talks about this as well in the books she has written on centering prayer, is that centering prayer is what she would claim to be the Christian prayer, because it's the prayer of kenosis. It's the kenotic path that we practice in this form of centering prayer. And it's helpful, Thomas Keating talks about this as well, it's helpful to understand that when we go into some silence, there's different ways that we go into silence, and there's different reasons why we go into silence. Often on Pause for Peace, I'm guiding us in through like more of this heart-centered meditation, which is one form of like being in silence or guided in prayer. And centering prayer is another form. Some of us might be familiar with the practice of like transcendental meditation, in which we use a mantra to be in silence that will like kind of lift us up into like a higher level of consciousness. Some might be aware of like a breath prayer or of a mindfulness prayer where we're like really tuning in to what's going on in our head, to what's going on in our body. And like sometimes in that silence, we're even like kind of floating along with wherever we get. Centering prayer in its like essence, according to Cynthia Bourget, who's also a student of Thomas Keating, Centering prayer is a way in which we practice kenosis. This is why she says it is the Christian form of prayer. Because what happens inwardly when we get silent in quiet in centering prayer, of course, we get silent and quiet in like meditation, and then everything internally and sensors, all of them just like rev right up, especially if we're somebody who's not used to getting quiet. The more we like, and even if we are, there are days where like just nothing will settle down. The monkey mind will not stop. But the aim of centering prayer, I like to think of it like this, is that when I'm in this time of quiet, I'm not using like a mantra to like keep me razor focused or anything like that. I actually use a visual, which some might even argue that's like kind of beyond what centering prayer should do. But I use the visual of like kind of breathing down deep within, and then whenever anything does arise, like my grocery list, or like, oh, everything I need to get done by like yesterday, or like, you know, all the ways I think somebody done me wrong, all that kind of stuff, when all of that arises, I have the visual of allowing it, maybe even with my breath, like allowing it to like float down the river. Just like if there's a river within me or a river before me, I just visualize like, oh, when I become aware of that, I let it float down the river. And so it's like a muscle that we train. Centering prayer like is this muscle of this letting go that we train, because what happens so often, and when ego kind of gets in the middle of our centering prayer, we attach, we grab on, we cling. Get it? And the whole thing is like going through life like the knife going through a done cake that comes out clean. There's no clinging. So we don't cling to anything. We don't cling to the laundry list. Thoughts are going to arise when we go into meditation. The brain is like created to think, according to Myra by Star. So thoughts are going to arise, but we don't cling to them. We have this practice, maybe because it's like visualizing like, okay, I'm in this deep place and whatever's arising, I'm just letting it float down the river. I'm just letting it, I don't want to hold on to it and like pull it into me and like wrestle with it and keep it here. That is the exact opposite of what we are to do in centering prayer. So I want to invite you to spend a little time in centering prayer with me, not promising that this is going to be a peaceful form of prayer, but this is a practice that if we actually do centering prayer, usually 20 minutes is the best sit to have for a centering prayer, because the brain waves begin to change with 20 minutes. And we're not going to do 20 minutes today, but this is a practice to do over and over and over again every day. And that's the way, just like if you go to the gym and you like, you know, work a certain muscle out, you do the same thing in centering prayer. It's a practice that I do daily, knowing that some days it's going to go more smoothly than others for whatever reasons, but I let it go. I don't judge. I just notice. And we allow centering prayer to begin to like transform us, to make it a little bit easier for us to join our voices with that amazing prayer that is recorded as being on Jesus' lips in the garden before his arrest and crucifixion. Not my will, God, but yours be done. That is not an easy place to get to. He spent his whole life practicing that. And we can spend a little bit of time right now practicing that. So let's get ourselves in a position where we will feel at ease, like we don't have to be too stiff and rigid, but not too relaxed that we're going to fall asleep. So just some position in which you feel supported. In my years of practicing centering prayer, when I was like seriously practicing all the time, I would actually lay on the floor, because that was like a position in which I could feel at ease and allow this practice to like come forth. So when we are in that place of ease, I'm going to invite us to take a deep breath. And maybe even you will, as you're taking those deep breaths, maybe you need 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them to like kind of visualize yourself like diving beyond your like rational mind, like deep into yourself. So we take one deep breath and release it. Another deep breath. And release it. Some people actually just use the breath during centering prayer. Anytime they begin to notice that they're clinging to anything, any thoughts that are coming up, they just take another deep breath, and it's like that erases the board. It just like clears everything away once again. Whatever visual like practice, however that works for you, to keep yourself in the now and to keep yourself continuing to be practicing this letting go of whatever comes, a sensation, a thought, a feeling. Let it go, because centering prayer is not the time in which to cling to anything. So another deep breath. And if we were doing a 20-minute sit, we would already have a timer set for 20 minutes so that we don't have to worry about the time. We're just going to sit in the quiet for 20 minutes. Use our breath or a visual whenever you're feeling yourself like clinging to something, because we're seeking to be like that knife that is clear when it cuts through a cake that is done baking. Throughout centering prayer, there's not like a particular form of a breath pattern. We can just use our breath to bring us back to the present now whenever we're aware that we are floating off somewhere else, so that we can just be this observer that really is seeking to release whatever arises. Thought, feeling, sensation. We're going to go for a little bit longer, but I remind us that this can be a practice that can be really difficult for some of us. We might find it difficult to be like sitting still. We might actually be afraid of silence. We might have a mind that is going 100 million miles a minute. And so this form of letting go to all of that again and again and again can like feel like such an intense workout, but it's worth it. It's worth it so that this column of stillness continues to be shaped in us. Like it's this whole practice of being transformed from the inside out. It's really kind of amazing. So let's keep at it for a little bit longer. There's no judgment around how many times you've had to like recenter yourself with your breath or like watch that like thought float away, put that to-do list on the raft down the river. There's no judgment around how many times you have to do that. So let's kind of get back into it for a little bit longer. You can always pause for peace, and be in the quiet much longer, up to 20 minutes or more if you'd like. Continuing to just let it go, let it go, let it go. Whatever arises, just let it go, let it go, let it go. If your hands are not like facing palms upward, like you're almost receiving a gift in your hands, if they're not like that yet, I'm going to invite you to take that position with your hands for just another minute or so of being in the stillness. And again, I'm not wanting you to like cling to what you might be noticing, but the position itself is like a position of being ready to receive. It's a position that is opposite of clinging. So it's a position of surrender in many ways. So I invite you to take that position with your hands. You can have them in your lap. I love to use a pillow for support of my arms. You've been noticing that now. If you're watching week after week, or if you're listening week after week, you may not have seen that, but that's what's going on. Let's take another deep breath. And continue to be in this practice of centering prayer. It's allowing the centeredness of ourselves to come forth as all of the other chatter, everything else that arises, to be able to be released. Again and again and again, released. No attachment to anything that arises in this time. Now I'll invite you to place your hands like palms together, prayer pose, the universal prayer pose for so many of us. And we can close our centering prayer merely by bowing our head to the holy, to this sacred time that we've been able to have, and even to the presence that we have with one another over this beautiful podcast, this amazing ability to be together even while we're not physically together. And when we're ready, we can bring our eyes back open, our awareness back to this conscious moment in which we are. And two things I want to say about centering prayer. I don't know what your experience was today. You might want to keep a little journal if you want to do the practice of centering prayer. I find it really helpful to keep a journal, not around like what all took place, but just little notes almost, like this is the date that I did this, maybe the location, like if I was laying on the floor or sitting in the chair, like outside at my lawn chair outside, whatever it might be. It might be helpful to note the time in a little journal of a centering prayer practice. And you may just want to jot like one sentence about what went on for you. Like not in terms of what you like found it difficult to attach to, but it might just be like continual thoughts about the to-do list arose. That, no judgment about that, but it's helpful, I think, over time to notice a pattern that might be going on. That's totally separate from the actual practice of centering prayer, but it's a pattern, it's a practice that I added to my own centering prayer practice as I was going through spiritual direction training and was actually told I had to keep a journal of my meditative practice. I found it really helpful to then go back and see like, oh wow, what I'm noticing is that every time I'm like really tired when I sit down to be in centering prayer, I find it much more monkey mind is going on, much more difficult to like keep to that place of releasing and letting go. Or every time I'm outside, it's actually a whole lot easier for me to be able to release in centering prayer. And every time that I like meditate or have my sit for longer than 20 minutes, it's like, yeah, wow, that's so easy after that. We might actually have to work up to 20 minutes when we're working on centering prayer. So that's also another option. And then my last thing I want to say about centering prayer, and I think this is a quote from Joan Chittister, that just like amazing sister in the Roman Catholic tradition who really is like a little bit of a rabble rouser, I should say, but like a fierce advocate for justice, for like the rights of those who have long had their rights overlooked. And Sister Joan, I'm pretty sure it was her that said this, like, it is actually a helpful thing if you had to have a centering prayer practice today where you have had to like let go, like 100 or more times. Like that it was like not just one of those days where I only like had things arise that I had to like send down the little river, floating down the little river like 3 times, but like over and over and over and like 1,000 times my 20 minutes I had to like center myself. And because she says, I'm pretty sure it's her that says this quote, because that is the way that you build the muscle of centering prayer. A practice like that actually is one that like increases the ability to be able to let go. It's, not a practice at all. If we enter into our, 20-minute time of centering prayer and we never once have to get ourselves recentered by releasing and letting go in whatever way we do that. Like, it's beautiful that we're able to be like that centered and like that calm right away and in that column of release. And yet in some ways it's not getting us ready for the life practice of letting go, releasing, not clinging to anything. So I am grateful that you gave centering prayer practice a try today. Whatever happened for you, no judgment whatsoever. That's not a part of this practice. It's actually a way to continue to develop this spiritual muscle of not clinging to anything, so that we too join Jesus on the path of kenosis, this kenotic path of letting go. Blessings for the rest of your week. Come back to this Pause for Peace again and again so that you might practice the centering prayer practice, whatever will help you to live a world that is much more like this and much less like this. Open to whatever comes. Blessings.